Kakadosh Bokeror, Shavua Tov. We're just going to continue with the halachot of Kaddish. He's talking about the halachot of Kaddish, which is going to be answered by the people. So we know that when the Shliach Tzibur is going to say Yitbarach, here, according to Shtam Maran, everybody answers Amen, and also when he says Berichu, and also when he answers Amen. Obviously, we don't answer Amen after Yitbarach nowadays, because the Yitbarach, if you remember, was part of the beginning part, according to Shtam Maran, which is basically Amen Yeshem Abba, always goes until Yitbarach. It does not go until Al-Maya. Ashkenazim had the minhag that usually they would go until Al-Maya. Certain nuschaot and Ashkenazim, whether it's Sfarad or others, would do until Yitbarach. Right? However, though, the minhag of the Sfaradim in Edot Mizrach is going to be going until Daminam Be'alma. However, though, the Yitbarach is still part of the Amen Yeshem Abba. What is the nafkamina? What's the difference? For example, certain times in the Tefillah, you're in the middle of the Tefillah. So, for example, right now, let's say I'm in the middle of Keriat Shema, or the Brachot of Keriat Shema, and all of a sudden I hear Kaddish. So what am I supposed to answer? So I'm supposed to answer the first 5 Amenim, because if you remember the first 5 Amenim, which is on the main part of the Kaddish, which is either called the Kaddish Le'elah, or it was the full Kaddish, even though some people had the minhag of calling it Chetzi Kaddish. It's not really Chetzi. The full Kaddish was that Kaddish, right? And then afterwards they added on certain parts to the Kaddish to show you what it is. So Titkabal was always after Tefillah. Yeshel Amarabah was always after Torah Shebichtav, the written Torah. That's why you do it after Shir Shel Hayom. You do the written Torah after, whether it's going to be Shir HaShirim, you do Yesh Lama. After Torah Sheba'al Peh is going to be Al Yisrael. That's why anything of a speech usually is Torah Sheba'al Peh, or anything which is after the Kaveh, we're going to do Torah Sheba'al Peh, Tanav Liyahu, Mishnayot, anything which has to do with the oral Torah, you always do Kaddish Al Yisrael. So, but this main part of the Kaddish is the first 5 Amenim. So in the middle of Kriyat Shema, or in the middle of the Brachot of Kriyat Shema, what happens is you would answer for the first 5 Amenim. But where would you answer Amen Yeshem Abba until? So according to the way that we're supposed to answer is you're supposed to answer only until Yitbarach. Why? Because according to Maran, that is the main part of the Amen Yeshem Abba until Yitbarach. So therefore you answer until Yitbarach. During Pesukei de Zimna, you're allowed to answer the entire Amen Yeshem Abba until Daminam Be'alma. But when it comes to the Berachot of Kriyat Shema, you're only allowed to answer until Yitbarach. The same halacha would apply to Elokai Netzor. It is very important to note, if you remember, we spoke about that technically you're allowed to add personal supplications throughout the Amida. However, the best thing is to add it at the end, right before the second Yul Ratzon, in the middle of Elokai Netzor. Now, why exactly? Because if you're going to come and you're going to start adding the supplications little by little throughout, whether it's going to be Ashivenu Avinu Torotecha for Teshuvah, whether it's going to be Barechenu or Barech Alenu later on, it's going to be for Parnasah, whether it's going to be Rifaenu for Refuah Shlema, and so on and so forth. So then what happens is if you get caught and you're in the middle of the Amidah, you cannot answer anything. However, though, if you're at the end in Elokai Netzor, you're allowed to answer like Berachot of Kriyat Shema. So therefore, since you're allowed to answer like Berachot of Kriyat Shema, so in the middle of Elokai Netzor, all of a sudden now the Shliach Tzibur is going to start the Chazarat HaShatz. So I'm not allowed to answer Amen, but I'm allowed to answer Kedusha, the parts of Kedusha, Kadosh Kadosh, Baruch Kivod Hashem Mekomo. If they're in the middle of it, I could answer Barechu. I'm allowed to say Amodim Anachnu Lach, and I'm allowed to answer Kaddish for Amenim. So for example, let's say Arvit on a regular weeknight, that there's no Chazarat HaShatz. He starts right away Kaddish. So I'm in the middle of Elokai Netzor. So I'm allowed to answer Amen on the first 5 Amenim, and I'm allowed to answer Amen Yeshem Abba until Yitbarach. Now again, all this is because the Yitbarach is part of the first part, is part of Amen Yeshem Abba. It's Amen Yeshem Abba Mevorach Olam Yitbarach. So since it goes until Yitbarach, so therefore that's what I'm allowed to answer. If not, then we already mentioned that the minhag of the Sfaradim de Mizrach is always to do until Daminam Be'alma. But it is important to know that Yitbarach is one group, in order that when you cannot answer fully, so for example, Berachot Kriyat Shema or in Elokai Netzor, you're going to be answering until Yitbarach.